Mike Tyson was walking down the street, enjoying the warm evening air. He wasn't in a hurry, just moving at his own pace, watching life unfold around him. Somewhere up ahead, he heard the faint sound of a kid muttering, the soft clatter of metal, the kind of frustrated noises that came when something just wasn't working. As he got closer, he saw a boy, maybe 10 or 11, crouched on the sidewalk next to a beat-up bicycle. The back wheel was crooked, the chain had slipped off, and the kid's fingers were smeared with grease as he tried, unsuccessfully, to fix it. His face was scrunched up in frustration, his hands yanking at the chain only for it to slip free again. With a sharp exhale, he muttered something under his breath and let his arms drop in defeat. Mike stopped a few feet away, watching for a second. He had seen this kind of determination before, that stubbornness of wanting to fix something yourself, but slowly realizing you might need a little help. He smirked slightly, waiting to see if the kid would keep trying, but when he heard a muttered, "Man, why won't this stupid thing work?" he figured it was time. "Need a hand?" he asked casually, stepping forward. The kid looked up, ready to brush off the offer, but the moment his eyes landed on Mike, his mouth opened slightly in shock. He blinked a few times as if making sure he wasn't imagining things. Because the man offering to fix his bike was Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was walking down the street, enjoying the warm evening air. It was one of those quiet days, the kind where you had nowhere to be, no rush, just moving at your own pace and watching the world go by. Somewhere up ahead, he heard the clatter of metal, the sound of something rattling, followed by a frustrated sigh. A few more steps and he saw the source, a kid, maybe 10 or 11, crouched next to his bike, his hands covered in grease, his face scrunched up in concentration. The bike wasn't in great shape. The back wheel looked misaligned, and the chain had slipped off completely. The boy was working on it with the kind of stubbornness Mike recognized. He wasn't the type to ask for help easily. He pulled at the chain, tried to loop it back onto the gears, but as soon as he let go, it popped off again. He groaned, wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, smearing oil across his skin, and let out an exasperated mutter under his breath. Mike stopped a few feet away, crossing his arms as he watched. He had seen this before, the determination, the refusal to give up, the quiet frustration building with every failed attempt. The kid was close, but not close enough, and Mike knew that feeling all too well. He waited for a moment, letting the boy work through it, but when he heard a muttered, "Man, why won't this stupid thing work?" he figured it was time. "Need a hand?" he asked casually, stepping forward. The kid flinched slightly, looking up as if ready to refuse, but then he saw who was standing in front of him. His mouth opened a little, his hands froze mid-air, and his eyes widened in disbelief. He blinked once, twice, like he was making sure he wasn't seeing things. Because the man offering to fix his bike was Mike Tyson. Jason had been focused on his bike for so long that when the voice interrupted him, he almost didn't process what was happening. He had been expecting some random adult, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone telling him to move out of the way, maybe just a passerby with unwanted advice. What he wasn't expecting was the deep, familiar voice that had been heard in movies, interviews, and, of course, boxing rings. He looked up, blinking against the setting sun, and for a moment, his brain refused to connect the dots. Standing there, arms crossed, watching him with the kind of calm patience that only someone who had seen and done it all could have, was Mike Tyson. Jason's fingers, still covered in grease, hovered uselessly in the air, as if they had forgotten what they were supposed to be doing. He felt his mouth open slightly, but no words came out. For a second, all he could do was stare, because what were the odds? He had spent the last 20 minutes fighting with his bike chain, cursing under his breath, covered in sweat and dirt, and now, of all people, Mike Tyson was standing in front of him asking if he needed help. Jason's first instinct was disbelief. His mind scrambled to make sense of it. Maybe it was a look-alike? Maybe his brain was playing tricks on him? But no, the voice, the posture, the slight smirk that looked like he was waiting for Jason to react, it was all too real. This was actually happening. He blinked again, trying to get words out, but his brain still wasn't cooperating. Mike, still watching, let out a small chuckle. You good, kid? Jason finally managed to swallow and nod, though his body still felt weirdly frozen. Yeah. He glanced down at his bike, suddenly feeling ridiculous for how long he had been fighting with it. It's just a chain. Keep slipping. Mike took a step closer, crouching down next to him, giving the bike a quick glance. Let me see. Jason scooted back slightly as Mike reached out and spun the pedal, watching how the chain jumped but wouldn't catch properly. He gave the back wheel a little wiggle, testing the tension, and nodded to himself. Yeah, you been riding this a while? Jason nodded quickly. Yeah, it was my brother's. He gave it to me, but it's kinda old. Mike hummed in understanding, wiping his fingers on his jeans before carefully reaching for the chain. Yeah, happens. You gotta keep this clean, man. Too much dirt, grease thickens up, and next thing you know, it's slipping like this. Jason watched closely, still not quite over the fact that Mike Tyson was now crouched next to him, casually talking about bike maintenance. Mike adjusted the chain, trying to loop it back, but just as he thought he had it, it slipped off again. He let out a small exhale and smirked. All right, this one's got a little fight in it. Jason grinned. Told you. As Mike worked, his fingers moving with a practiced ease, something about this moment felt familiar. It had been decades since he had fixed a bike chain, but the muscle memory was still there. He remembered being a kid in Brooklyn, riding his own beat-up bike, feeling that same frustration when the chain would slip mid-ride, leaving him stranded blocks away from home. He remembered older kids showing him how to fix it, how to twist the back wheel just right to get the right tension, how to work through the grime and get it back in place. He had been just like this kid once, sitting on the curb, hands covered in grease, staring at a problem that felt bigger than it really was. And now? Now, he was the one helping. Funny how life worked. As Mike fiddled with the chain, Jason's brain finally caught up to reality, and the initial shock started wearing off. So, you really used to ride bikes? He asked, still watching every move Mike made. Mike chuckled. Man, what you think? I wasn't always in limos. Jason smirked. Yeah, but like, you were boxing, right? You didn't have time for stuff like this. Mike nodded, wiping his fingers on his jeans again before adjusting the back wheel slightly. Yeah, but I was still a kid. Everybody rode bikes. That was how we got around. You ain't had a bike, you was stuck. Jason nodded like that made perfect sense. Mike gave the pedal another spin, and this time, the chain caught. He watched it rotate a few times, making sure it was stable, then leaned back slightly. Try it now. Jason hesitated, then grabbed the handlebars and pressed down on the pedal. The bike rolled forward smoothly, the chain staying in place. He did a quick loop in the parking lot, testing the brakes, before rolling back to where Mike was standing. Yo, it works. Mike nodded. Told you, man. Just needed a little patience. Jason grinned, looking down at his bike like it was brand new again. For the first time in the past hour, Jason wasn't frustrated anymore. His hands were still covered in grease, but now it didn't feel like a mess. It felt like proof that he had fixed something. Well, mostly Mike had fixed it, but still, he had learned something. He wiped his hands on his shorts and looked up at Mike. Thanks, man. For real. Mike just shrugged. Ain't nothing. Gotta pass the knowledge down. Jason nodded, still smiling. Yeah. That makes sense. Jason swung his leg over the bike and got ready to ride off, but then stopped. I'm Jason, by the way. Mike smirked. Good to meet you, Jason. Jason hesitated for a second, then added, You're cool, man. Mike laughed. Yeah, you too, kid. Now go ride before you mess it up again. Jason grinned and pushed off. As Jason rode down the street, he kept glancing back at his bike, half expecting the chain to pop off again. But it didn't. The ride was smooth, the pedals moved without resistance, and for the first time in a while, he wasn't worrying about it breaking down on him. It wasn't just about the bike. It was about knowing he could fix it. And maybe, next time, he wouldn't even need help. Mike watched the kid disappear down the block, then wiped his hands on his jeans one last time and kept walking. Nothing big had happened. No cameras, no crowd, no viral moment. Just a kid, a bike, and a little patience. And to Mike, that was more than enough. Jason gripped the handlebars of his bike, his fingers still a little sticky from the grease he had wiped off earlier. The chain was back on, the wheel was steady, but for some reason, he hesitated before pushing off. Maybe it was because, for the last half hour, every time he tried to ride, something went wrong. Maybe he didn't fully trust that the bike was actually fixed. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the fact that Mike Tyson, the Mike Tyson, was standing right there, watching him, arms crossed, waiting to see if the kid would take off or if he'd have to step in again. Jason glanced down at the pedals, took a deep breath, and pushed down with his right foot. The bike rolled forward smoothly, no stuttering, no slipping chain, just a clean, effortless movement. He pedaled again, a little harder this time, and the wheels spun easily, as if the bike had never been broken in the first place. He expected something to go wrong, half waited for that frustrating moment when the chain would pop off again, but it didn't happen. He kept pedaling, picking up speed, rolling down the sidewalk like he had never struggled with this thing at all. At first, Jason kept his pace slow, half expecting something to still be off. But when he realized the bike was holding up fine, he leaned forward a little, gripped the handlebars tighter, and picked up speed. He pushed harder on the pedals, feeling the smooth motion of the chain holding strong, the wheels rolling without resistance. He had been riding this bike for months, but right now, it felt brand new, like it had just come out of the shop. He took a turn, testing the way it handled, then hit the brakes lightly to make sure everything was in place. It was perfect. He circled back toward where Mike was standing, still watching, still calm, like he had known all along that this was going to work. Jason skidded to a stop a few feet away, planting both feet on the ground to steady himself. He looked down at the bike, then back at Mike, then down at the bike again. Man, it's like a whole new ride. Mike nodded, arms still crossed, the hint of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Told you. Just needed the right fix. Jason sat there for a second, still gripping the handlebars, feeling something he hadn't felt since the bike started acting up weeks ago. Confidence. Before, every time he rode, he had this nagging feeling that something was going to go wrong. Now, he didn't have that anymore. He didn't have to keep glancing down, didn't have to feel that frustration bubbling up, didn't have to worry that one bad pedal would throw the whole thing off again. He knew it was working, and that changed everything. Mike must have seen something in his expression because he chuckled and nodded toward the street. Go on, take it for a real spin. Let's see if it holds up. Jason didn't need to be told twice. He pushed off and started pedaling, this time not holding back, not worrying, just moving. The wind hit his face as he picked up speed, rolling smoothly over the pavement, his tires humming as they gripped the ground. It had been a while since he had ridden like this, without hesitation, without second guessing, just enjoying the feeling of moving forward. He swerved slightly, testing his balance, then leaned into a turn, his hands light on the handlebars. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about fixing the bike, wasn't thinking about what was wrong, wasn't thinking about what could break next. He was just riding. Jason kept going, looping around the block, passing the same houses, the same street corners, but everything felt different. The bike was his again. It wasn't just something he was fighting with, wasn't a problem he had to solve every time he got on it. It was just a bike, and it was doing what it was supposed to do. He rode past a group of kids playing basketball on the sidewalk, zipped past a neighbor walking their dog, and didn't even realize how far he had gone until he saw the end of the block coming up. He pulled the brakes, slowing to a smooth stop, and turned back toward where he had started. Mike was still standing there, hands in his pockets now, watching, waiting. Jason pedaled back, still grinning. All right, yeah, this is solid. Mike nodded, like he had never doubted it. Told you. Just needed a little patience. Jason hopped off the bike, letting it rest against his leg. He wiped his greasy hands on his shorts, then looked at Mike again, that same curiosity from earlier flickering in his eyes. So, you really used to ride bikes? Mike let out a short laugh. Man, everybody rode bikes back in the day. That was our way to get around. You ain't had a bike, you was stuck. Jason smirked. Yeah, but like, you boxed, right? You were already training and stuff? Mike nodded, stretching his arms slightly. Yeah, but I was still a kid. Still had to get places. And back then, ain't nobody giving you a ride everywhere. You wanted to be somewhere, you rode your bike or you walked. Jason nodded like that made sense. Jason shifted on his feet, his hands gripping the handlebars loosely. Do you think, like, if you never boxed, you'd still be strong? Mike tilted his head slightly, thinking that over. Strength ain't just about muscles, kid. It's about what you do when things get tough. Keep working at something. Keep pushing. That's how you get strong. Jason sat with that for a second, letting it sink in. Then he nodded. Yeah. That makes sense. Jason straddled his bike, gripping the handlebars, looking down the street. He hesitated for a second, then looked back at Mike. Hey. I'm Jason, by the way. Mike smirked. Good to meet you, Jason. Jason nodded, like he was filing that moment away for later. You're cool, man. Mike laughed. Yeah, you too, kid. Now go ride before you mess it up again. Jason pedaled away, rolling smoothly down the sidewalk. He didn't look back this time. He didn't need to. His bike worked. He knew it wasn't going to fail him anymore. He turned the corner, disappearing from sight, but something about the way he rode felt different. It wasn't just about the bike. It was about knowing he could fix it. Mike stood there for another moment, watching the street, then shook his head slightly with a smirk before turning and walking away. Nothing big had happened. No cameras, no crowd, no big speech. Just a kid, a bike, and a little patience. And to Mike, that was enough. Jason had been riding this bike for months, but this was the first time it actually felt like his. No resistance in the pedals, no annoying slipping chain, no worrying about whether or not it was going to break down on him in the middle of the street. Just movement, smooth and steady, like it was supposed to be. He kept his pace slow at first, still half expecting something to go wrong, but as he pushed down on the pedals and felt the bike respond exactly how it should, his confidence grew. He leaned forward slightly, gripping the handlebars tighter, and let himself speed up. The wind hit his face, cool and refreshing, a sharp contrast to the frustration that had been boiling inside him just 30 minutes ago when he was stuck on the sidewalk, convinced he'd never get this thing to work right again. Now, the doubt was gone. The hesitation had disappeared. He wasn't thinking about fixing the bike anymore, he was just riding it. Jason took a turn at the end of the block, testing how the bike handled, feeling the way the tires gripped the pavement without any wobble. He pushed a little harder, gaining speed, feeling lighter with every second. It wasn't just about the bike working again, it was about the feeling of not having to think about it anymore, of just moving forward. He zipped past a couple of kids playing basketball on the sidewalk, then past a neighbor walking their dog, barely noticing them as he focused on the rhythm of the ride. It had been weeks since he had been able to go this fast, since he had been able to just ride without that nagging thought in the back of his mind that the chain could snap at any second. Mike was still standing back where they started, watching, hands in his pockets, the same relaxed expression on his face. Jason circled around, pulling a wide turn before coming back toward him, the bike responding to every movement like it was brand new. He skidded to a stop, planting his feet on the pavement, still gripping the handlebars, still grinning. Man, it's like a whole new bike. Mike smirked slightly, nodding in that way that said he had known this would happen all along. Nah, it's the same bike, kid. You just finally know how to handle it. Jason looked down at the frame, then back at Mike, thinking about that for a second before nodding. He supposed it was true. The bike hadn't changed, it had just needed a little work. A little patience. A little effort to make sure it could do what it was supposed to do. It was a weird feeling, realizing that something could seem broken but wasn't actually beyond saving. That sometimes, things didn't need to be replaced, they just needed to be fixed the right way. And when they were, they could run just as well as they had before. Maybe even better. Jason adjusted his grip on the handlebars, shifting his weight slightly, feeling a little different than he had before. A little more sure of himself. He wasn't just some kid with a broken bike anymore. He was the kid who had figured it out, who had worked through the problem, even if he had needed a little help along the way. Jason wasn't the type to talk just to talk. If he had something to say, it was because he was actually thinking about it. And right now, as he looked at Mike, at the guy who had just helped him fix something that had been frustrating him for weeks, he realized he had a question that had been sitting in the back of his mind for a while. Hey, do you think if you never boxed, you'd still be strong? Mike tilted his head slightly, considering the question, then gave a small shrug. Strength ain't just about muscles, kid. It's about what you do when things get tough. Keep working at something. Keep pushing. That's how you get strong. Jason nodded slowly, letting that sink in. He wasn't sure if he fully understood it yet, but something about it felt right. Jason pushed off again, rolling a few feet forward, then stopped and looked back. So, what, you think I could get strong? Mike smirked, raising an eyebrow. You think you can? Jason hesitated for a second, then shrugged. I dunno. Mike nodded toward the bike. You just learned how to fix that, didn't you? Jason blinked, looking down at the frame, then back up. Yeah. You couldn't do that 10 minutes ago. But now you can. So yeah, you can get stronger, too. Jason sat with that answer for a second before nodding, gripping the handlebars a little tighter. Cool. Mike stretched his arms slightly, letting out a small breath, like he was about to keep walking. Jason adjusted his grip on the handlebars, looking down the street, like he was about to take off. It wasn't a big moment, wasn't anything dramatic, just two people who had crossed paths, who had helped each other out in some small way, who would probably never talk about this again, but would both remember it all the same. Jason glanced over his shoulder one last time. Well, guess I'll see you around? Mike nodded, stuffing his hands into his pockets. Yeah, kid. See you around. Jason pushed off, pedaling away. He didn't look back this time. He didn't need to. His bike worked. He knew it wasn't going to fail him anymore. As Jason rode, he felt something shift. Not just in the way the bike moved, but in the way he felt riding it. There was a confidence there now, a certainty that hadn't been there before. He took a turn a little sharper, pushed a little harder on the pedals, let himself go a little faster than he normally would. He trusted it now. And that trust? It made the ride feel completely different. Jason had thought the problem was just the bike. That if he could get it fixed, everything would be fine. But now, as he rode down the street, feeling the smooth glide of the wheels beneath him, he realized it had been more than that. It wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was about knowing that if something broke, he could figure out how to fix it. Maybe not always alone. Maybe sometimes with a little help. But still, he could do it. By the time Jason reached his house, he had already started thinking about other things, what he was going to do later, what game he was going to play, what he was going to eat. But somewhere in the back of his mind, the conversation with Mike was still there, tucked away like a small but important lesson he hadn't expected to learn today. Mike watched Jason disappear down the block, then wiped his hands on his jeans one last time before turning and walking away. Nothing big had happened. No cameras, no crowd, no viral moment. Just a kid, a bike, and a little patience. And to Mike, that was enough. Jason rode through the neighborhood, his mind still replaying the conversation with Mike. He didn't think too hard about it at first, just let the bike carry him forward, the wind pressing against his face, the familiar streets rolling by. But as he pedaled, he realized something felt different. Not just the bike, though that was running smoother than ever, but the way he felt riding it. It wasn't just about having wheels again, it was about knowing that if something went wrong, he could fix it. Before today, every time he rode, there was that small fear in the back of his mind. The fear that the chain would slip again, that he'd get stuck somewhere, that he'd have to walk the whole way home pushing a broken bike. That fear had been there so long he hadn't even realized it was weighing him down. But now, it was gone. He didn't think about what might go wrong anymore. He just rode. When he reached the end of the block, he glanced back over his shoulder, expecting to see Mike still standing there. But he was gone. Jason smirked a little, shaking his head. Mike Tyson had just appeared out of nowhere, helped him fix his bike, dropped some knowledge, and then disappeared like it was nothing. Like it was just another part of his day. Maybe it was. Jason didn't talk about it much that day. His friends asked where he had been, why he had taken so long to come back, and he just shrugged. Had to fix my bike. It didn't feel like something he needed to explain. It wasn't some crazy story, at least not to him. It was just something that happened, like any other small thing in a normal day. But later that evening, as he sat in his room, flipping a baseball in his hands absent-mindedly, the words Mike had said stuck with him. You just learned how to fix that. Took a little time, but you figured it out. That's how you get good at anything. He thought about how frustrated he had been earlier, about how close he had been to giving up and walking his bike home, about how he had figured it out, not alone, sure, but he had still been part of it. He had watched, he had learned, he had understood. Maybe that was what Mike had meant. Maybe strength wasn't about being able to punch through walls or win fights. Maybe it was about not quitting, even when something felt impossible. A few days later, Jason was riding again when he hit a rough patch of pavement, felt his bike wobble for just a second, then heard that dreaded clank of metal. He braked instinctively, heart sinking, already knowing what had happened. The chain had slipped again. For a second, frustration flared up, not this again. He sighed, rolling his bike to the curb, ready to go through the whole process of struggling with it, getting his hands covered in grease, probably getting annoyed all over again. But then he stopped. This time, he knew what to do. This time, he wasn't staring at the bike like it was some unsolvable problem. This time, he had already learned how to fix it. So he crouched down, took a deep breath, and started working. No panic. No stress. Just patience. And a few minutes later, the chain was back on, his hands were a little dirty, but he was already back on his bike, pedaling like nothing had happened. That was when he realized something. He wasn't frustrated anymore. Because now, he wasn't afraid of the problem, he knew he could handle it. Mike never found out that Jason fixed the bike on his own that day. He didn't need to. That wasn't the point. He hadn't helped to be remembered, hadn't given advice expecting to see the results. He had just been there in the moment, helped someone who needed it, and moved on. That's how things worked. People always talked about the big moments in life, the ones with flashing lights, big crowds, history-making fights. But the truth was, most of life wasn't about those moments. It was about the small ones. The ones that didn't make headlines, didn't get posted online, didn't feel legendary at the time. But sometimes, those moments stuck with you longer than you expected. And that was enough.